Good morning. Today is Friday, February the 9th. The time is a few minutes after 10 o'clock, and we will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. Our first item on our agenda is the Pledges of Allegiance, and we're going to be led this morning by Mrs. Martha Gale.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. We thank you all for coming to the meeting today. It's always nice to be able to look out and see faces smiling back at us. There's lots of hard work that gets done in anticipation of this meeting, and we're always happy to share with the public and individuals in the profession with what's going on in the world. I'd like to take a moment this morning to recognize a couple of members in our audience and our appreciation for their service. We have with us this morning Ms. Katrina Gonzalez from the Governor's Office, and we appreciate your joining us today. And we have Mr. Victor Probant in the audience as well, and we thank you for coming as well. The next item on our agenda is the roll call and discussion and possible action to excuse board members. Present.
Jim Jeffries.
Present.
Buster Renfro.
Present.
Slate Scott.
Present.
Chance Bolton.
Present.
Tony Pena.
Present.
Martha Gale Lynch.
Present.
Alex Sostre. And Joyce Unity.
Present.
Mr. Ostre has communicated with the chair that he is ill with the flu, and so I would move that his absence be approved and excused.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Our next business item is the election of vice chair and secretary to the board. We have a slate of officers that were proposed at our previous meeting. The vice chair proposal was Martha Gale Reed Lynch, and secretary Mr. Earl Buster Renfro. The floor is open. Should there be any additional nominations? Hearing none, we certainly need to take action on the slate as presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move that we adopt the slate of officers as recommended. Vice Chair Martha Gale Reed Lynch and Secretary Earl Buster Renfro.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
We have a motion and 2 seconds. We'll give Mr. Black the credit for this particular second. So motion by Mr. Jeffries, second by Mr. Black. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And before I move on, I want to say Mr. Jeffries has been serving in our vice chair position for a while, and certainly appreciate the service and his automatic opportunity to serve on our AMC panel as well with that seat. So thank you, Jim. No doubt we still have plenty of work for you to do. We're just going to make you do the heavy lifting on the education side, so don't go far away. All right. Okay. Agenda item number 4, we keep looking forward to being able to give you an announcement of an appointment for the AMC Advisory Committee. We're still missing some folks in that capacity, but we don't have any appointments at this time, so there will be no action on agenda item number 4. Our next item is the most exciting part of the year for me, and that's the assignment of committees. And agenda item number 5 has appointments designated for Budget Committee, our Education Committee, our Enforcement Committee, our Executive Committee, which happens to be the TALCB officers, and the liaison for our Agency Facilities Working Group. So my committee assignments for this year, and I believe I've spoken to most of you about your reassignments, and if I haven't, you can protest later, and I'll work it out with you. Budget has been previously chaired by Mr. Clayton Black, and we like having our oil man take a look at the numbers. We think he's been doing a great job in a leadership role there. He's agreed to continue to chair there, so that committee will be chaired by Mr. Black, and the members will be Alex Sostre and Tony Pena. Our Education Committee has been previously chaired by Mr. Jeffries, but we have quite a bit of heavy lifting to be done, and so I'm going to continue to ask him to serve in that capacity since we've moved him from the vice chair position. And Joyce Yanuzzi and Alex Sostre serving in that committee.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Actually, this past year, Tony Pena has chaired the Education Committee and done a wonderful job. I served under him, and I was proud to serve under him. He did a great job. So however you would like to handle that.
Okay. Well, my hope is I like to move folks around a little bit so we get additional exposure, but Tony, and certainly I'll be happy to visit with the two of you about reassignment if that's the preference.
Whatever best suits the need, so just let me know.
Okay. Enforcement has previously been chaired by Mr. Renfro, and thanks for correcting me, Jim. I did forget that you were doing lots of heavy lifting, and Tony did take on that leadership role. And Tony, I do appreciate the work that you did in the last year. I apologize for misstating that because I believe Jim served the year before you in that
Correct.
capacity. Enforcement has previously been chaired by Mr. Renfro. We're going to swap seats there, and Mr. Bolton has agreed to take the chair of enforcement, but Mr. Renfro will be supporting him in that capacity, and we were hoping to move Tony in that capacity, again, to try and move folks around a little bit so that we get broader exposure across the various committees. The Executive Committee, of course, will be your elected officials and the chair, so I will be the chair of the Executive Committee. Martha Gale Reed Lynch will be your vice chair, and your secretary will be Buster Renfro by virtue of the election we've just held. And the TALCB liaison will be Mr. Chance Bolton. Of course, by regulation, Ms. Martha Gale will be serving as your AMC connection from the board, but that's not an appointment, that's just an automatic statutory regulation. I know I gave you lots of names and fairly fast, and I do realize that we are being broadcast live and recorded, but Tony or staff, were you able to keep up? Good deal. Well, thank you very much for your willingness to serve. I appreciate the opportunity to get you to move around a little so that we can get a broader base on the board, continuing to expand our knowledge in deeper detail, various places. Our next agenda item is the discussion and possible action regarding appointments to our peer investigative committees. And you have applications from a number of folks wishing to serve in that capacity.
Madam Chair, before we move on to agenda item 6, did you talk about the liaisons to the facilities working group?
Do you need me to put it back on the record? I got it. You got it? Okay. Mr. Troy.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. In your materials, you have the slate of applicants for the Peer Investigative Committee. Staff has reviewed all of those applications and is recommending approval of all the applicants. The one caveat I would bring to your attention, Gregory Billings is in the process but has not yet completed his application for licensure in the state of Texas, which is a requirement for being on the Peer Investigative Committee. So staff would simply recommend that that appointment be subject to completing the application process. If you look on the next page, you will also see there is a report detailing the recent activities for the Peer Investigative Committee. If you look to the second column from the right, you'll see the year 2017 that we've just completed, and you can see the totals there. Please note that the numbers in red in the parenthetical indicate that an assignment was proffered to that member, but they declined for some reason, whether it was a conflict or they were unavailable. But most individuals this last go-around completed at least 2 assignments. The one exception you'll see on there, Mr. G.T. Patrick Murphy, didn't do any and hasn't done any in quite some time, but he has not reapplied.
I'd like to take a moment to appreciate our peer investigative committee members who volunteer to serve in these capacities or apply to serve in these capacities, because they do help us on the enforcement side, and to also compliment the fact that those numbers are up considerably in 2017. We actually used that committee to do a bit more heavy lifting than we had the year before. I believe we had 15 investigations completed by that committee compared to 3 the year before. So it does help the organization, and I appreciate the willingness for these folks to do the work. We do. We need a motion in order to approve, keeping in mind the recommendations made by staff as it relates to Mr. Billings.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Lynch?
I move that we accept the PIC applications for 2018 with the stipulation that a license is granted to Mr. Billings.
A motion by Ms. Lynch. Was that you, Mr. Bolton?
It was.
Second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I have had a request to make some movement on the agenda. We have the opportunity today to have some guests in the house from the Appraisal Subcommittee, and rather than make them wait until the very end of our agenda, which was near item 25, I'm going to go ahead and move them up to this position. So we are now just above public comments, and we will have our report.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the commission today. My name is Vicki Metcalf. I'm a policy manager on the staff of the Appraisal Subcommittee. I'm accompanied here today by Denise Graves, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the Appraisal Subcommittee. During the course of this week, we've also been joined by another policy manager, Christy Clammett. And the 3 of us have been here conducting our regular compliance review of the Texas Appraisal Regulatory Program. This is something we do with every state and jurisdiction every 2 years. So we were here almost exactly 2 years ago performing the same task. During the course of our compliance review, we like to always take an opportunity to speak before the board and just share with you some things about our organization. I'm available to answer, and we both are available to answer any questions you may have about what's going on nationally as well with respect to appraisal regulation or the like, or be able to at least take your questions back with us should we not have a response. But today, I would like to focus just on our time here in Texas. As I said, we're with the Appraisal Subcommittee, which of course is the federal agency that that oversees the regulation of real estate appraisers. Our story, we've provided you with some parting gifts. You'll see a copy of the criteria and our annual report. I'm going to be focusing on things in the annual report if you want to kind of turn pages with me as I talk. Our story, the story of the subcommittee, can be found on page 7 there, which many of you probably are aware of, but just as a reminder for the board and just for the audience as well, we always like to share how the subcommittee began. It's an outgrowth of the S&L crisis of the 1980s. And the thought that, and when Congress was kind of examining what was prompting the failures of the lending institutions at that particular point in time, it determined that part of the fault was believed to be with the appraisers and the appraisal community, in that it was not regulated in the majority of jurisdictions. In fact, at the time, Title 11 of FIREA, the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989, at the time that act was being developed and contemplated, there were only about 5 states that regulated real estate appraisers. And even then, they tended to be realtors with some extra appraisal education. And so it was something that was considered to be a need to help protect the federal funds of the country from that point forward, since so much had to be spent in the bailout of those lending institutions at the time. So they created the appraisal regulatory structure. They created our agency, the Appraisal Subcommittee, as the oversight entity. The Congress recognized that the Appraisal Foundation was already attempting to create some uniformity in the appraisal community, so it has anointed them as the entity that would continue to develop the criteria by which appraisers should be credentialed, which is of course, the appraiser criteria that you have before you, is the document that resulted from that effort. And of course, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, or USPAP, which is, of course, sets forth the requirements for how appraisers should practice, and of course, establishes the ethical conditions on which the appraisers should also be functioning and should be evaluated when they are when their work product is being questioned and needing to be disciplined by then the third entity, the state appraisal regulatory programs. It requires, as a result of FIREA, it also charges the different states and territories to have regulatory programs that have the ability to not only issue credentials to the individuals wishing to serve as appraisers for federally related transactions, but also to be able to sanction those individuals should they be found to have done something improper. In fact, that's really the key to all of it. You can license and certify individuals all day, but if they're not being held accountable for their actions, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of establishing the regulations and the law to begin with. So we do pay particular attention to that area as we are conducting our compliance reviews of the programs and just in general and how states are handling things. So that's essentially why the subcommittee was created and how we have a partnership with the Appraisal Foundation and its 2 boards, the Standards Board and the Qualifications Board, and of course the state regulatory programs across the country. With that said, I'd like to tell you who the subcommittee are, because Denise and I are just members of the staff of the Appraisal Subcommittee. The subcommittee membership can be found on page 11 of the book of our annual report there that you have before you. There are representatives from each of the banking agencies, like the Federal Reserve Board, the Office of Comptroller, the Currency, the Federal FDIC, and the National Credit Union Administration. And then we have 3 members from other entities that are related, such as the Federal Housing Finance Agency, HUD, and the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, or CFPB. They meet like your commission does once every month or 2 to make decisions on behalf of our agency. But they work with our members from those respective agencies, work with their own organizations on a day-to-day basis. So they just meet to talk about us every few months and tell us which direction to go as staff. Which kind of leads me into talking about the staff of the subcommittee. If you turn to page 13, you will see the list of the individuals that make up the staff of the Appraisal Subcommittee. You would see that we're probably one of the smaller federal agencies out there, and that the staff of the subcommittee makes up its own federal agency, and there's only 12 of us. So you have 2 of the 12 now. So good percentage of us here today. And we're the ones that on a day-to-day basis work in service to the appraisal regulatory scheme across the country. With that said, I want to also point you to a couple of other sections of the annual report, just for your information. First, I would like to have you flip back to page 54. That shows the rating system that we use for our compliance review compliance reviews of the programs. Basically, what happens after Denise and I leave here today is we go back and write a report. It's first a preliminary report, preliminary findings report, and that will just be from our staff to your staff, sharing anything that we have, any of the things we've observed or think might need to be potentially changed or within your program. We ask that you respond to that preliminary findings report within 60 days. And once we receive your response, our preliminary findings report and your response will go forth to the senior staff of the appraisal subcommittee and the subcommittee members themselves. And they make a decision on what's brought forward in the way of the final findings from this particular visit. The whole process tends to take about 3 months. You will probably receive your preliminary findings report within the next 3 weeks or so. And then we ask for you, again, have you respond within 60 days, depending on when we get that response in that process. Then, assuming you take the whole 60 days, then the subcommittee they need to make the final determination. That usually takes another three weeks or so. So I kind of like to say from beginning to the final report receipt is usually about 3 months, but can be less, particularly depending on how long it takes to receive a response from your organization. With that said, the final report is then the one that will result in, or will help determine what your rating will be. And then this is the rating system that we have as far as the different jurisdictions. You will see, if you want to see what other states are rated, you can find that on the website. We have the ones we rated 2 years ago in 2016 in the book that you have here. You see Texas is one of them, and you had excellent at that point in time. But if you want to see any other states that were not reviewed during 2016, you can look on our website and find that information if you're just interested in knowing that. With that, I kind of like to point out at this stage too, since our book does say 2016, just know that this is the most current version of our annual report. It sometimes gets people question, why are you giving us 2016? Now it's 2018. The annual report you have before you is our report to Congress. We have to report to Congress every year in accordance with Title 11 on our activities from the previous year. And we have to provide that report in June. And so this report that you have before you was prepared in June of 2017. We're working on the one for this year, 2018, which will cover our activities from 2017. So this is the most current version. Just know that's why you have this version. With that, I also like to point out just things that you as probably individuals, either with your work with the board or just in general, maybe in your personal jobs and speaking engagements and things like that you may engage in. We have a section starting in page 57, which provides statistics on the number of appraisers around the country, the types of complaints that we've received over the years, the number of appraisers as they fluctuated from 1992, which is when really the state started really licensing and certifying appraisers, to today. And those kinds of things. So you may find that interesting just to know yourselves, or we often get those questions about how many appraisers are there in the different states, or how how has the population of appraisers changed over the years, so that you might find those helpful. With that said, you can also find that kind of information on our website as well, so and maybe a little more current, so just know that it's there, but you do have it here. It's flipping on back further to page 69. It's a copy of Title 11. Title 11, we all refer to Title 11, and I know in your work with respect to the board and the like, you often are quoting things from Title 11. This is just a full copy of it. It includes the Dodd-Frank amendments from the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act. That was the most substantial change to Title 11 that had occurred since its inception in 1989. So the Dodd-Frank Act's provisions have been added in here as well. As you know, that made a number of changes to the appraisal regulatory program and the appraisal subcommittee and our responsibilities as well. For example, we now will be overseeing the regulation of appraisal management companies. And of course, we've started overseeing the state's regulations of trainees and of license level individuals as well, which was not as clearly defined in Title 11 in the past. And now it's truly something that we do look into as well, is how you credential trainees and license level individuals. With that, our AMC regulation aspect of things, for several different reasons, the date that we as the subcommittee will be involved in overseeing or adding that to our oversight process will be August 10th of 2018, so just in a few months. And so we will then add that to our compliance reviews. So the next compliance review you will have with us we will be including that as part of the areas that we look at. This review does not entail that. And last but certainly not least, but a page that I want to concentrate on from this point forward is page 81, which are our policy statements. Our policy statement, it begins our policy statements. Our policy statements are basically the like our rules. They're what we use to help evaluate the state programs, and we encourage the state staff to know the policy rules, policy statements that cover the areas that they're responsible for, so that they would, if you follow policy statements and of course the criteria in USPAP, they should be good in making sure that the state is functioning in a manner that we considered consistent with Title 11 FIREA. So we do concentrate on this. I like to stop at the policy statements because these are the areas that we look at while we're here on the review. You'll see that the report that you receive will be structured in a manner that follows along with each of these policy statements 1 through 7. Not 8, but 1 through 7. 8 is talking about sanctions and those types of things that would happen if we find a state to be non-compliant. You don't need to worry about policy statement 8. But that just is one that we have a coworker, Neil. I have a coworker, Neil Benichetti, and he says if you have to worry about policy statement 8, it's probably too late. So it's not an area you'll need to be concerned about. But it is there to let you know what would happen if we do find that the state is significantly out of compliance with their charge under Title 11 and the like. But I'm going to concentrate on policy statements 1 through 7 at this point in time. But before I go into these different little areas, I did want to stop and see if you had any questions of me about anything I've said or so far. Do you? Nothing? Okay. Okay, well then I'll just go into these different policy statements. One is just policy statement 1, statutes, rules, and regulations. What we do in preparation for our visits here is we've asked your staff for a great deal of information, including copies of all your statutes and regulations, any proposed amendments to those documents, policies that you've adopted as an organization and the like, and we review those. We also have asked for lists for everything else. Individuals who've been credentialed by your jurisdiction over the last 2 years, all the complaint, your complaint log of open and closed complaints, individuals who've received temporary practice, individuals who've received basically information about every aspect of your program. And they were kind enough to gather that information and send it to us and allow us to study before we've gotten here. And while we're here, we've selected some files to look at to help us see how everything's done in practice. And so we busied ourselves with looking at those files and talking to your staff over this week. And everybody has been so kind and so helpful and have responded to every question that we've had, responded to every request for additional information that we've had over the course of the time we've been preparing for the review, in addition to while we've been here. You're led by, Doug has been wonderful. You're led to have a wonderful executive director, and Kristen and everyone else has just been so helpful in helping and allowing us to prepare fully for this review and to have a very smooth time going through the file material and the like, and to discuss any things that we feel we needed to discuss. So I do thank them for that, and just want you to know what an excellent staff you have in general. Everyone has been great. With that, we did look at the statutes, rules, and regulations to begin with, and have made some comments about maybe some housekeeping kinds of things that you may need to do in the future, but nothing big. And so we do have some things with respect to statutes and regulations that we, not some things that we have that we need to talk about, but just in general that we have looked at those, and then we offer anything we want as far as comments to your staff. But we have read everything that you're doing so far. Policy Statement 2 is temporary practice, and that's basically, of course, the issuance of a credential to individuals who are wanting to do one assignment or on a temporary basis, but they're credentialed by another jurisdiction. And how you handle temporary practice is something that we look at. If you look at our policy statement on temporary practice, and actually with all the rest of them, we have a statement of what we expect and how we expect the state to function at the beginning, and then we conclude it with a summary of what, of the highlights of things we want to make sure you really get out of that. And so we have done that with temporary practice as well, and shared that with everyone. Of course, the National Registry is an area that we look at just as how it's working, and that we're making sure we're getting the information we need for the National Registry. And of course, the National Registry fee payments. As you know, the National Registry is the database that we maintain of all the individuals who have actually ever held a license or certification in any state or territory, but and it's one that the lenders consult when they're determining who can do work for federally related transactions and who cannot. So it's something that we do, and in addition to many other organizations and entities when they do consult the registry pretty regularly. And so we maintain that database, and we just try to make sure that the information on the database is accurate from each of the jurisdictions, and we do feel we can rely on that everyone can rely on that pretty assuredly. We look at the application processing and how applications are processed within each of the states for all the different credential levels. As I said, now we do look even at the license level and the training level for their compliance with what's called for in the appraiser qualifications criteria, and for both creating a credential and also renewing the credential. We look at reciprocity and how reciprocity is handled here. The Dodd-Frank Act did add some additional requirements for reciprocity that did not exist in the past. Reciprocity in the past had been more something we encouraged as the subcommittee. Now we now can say that states should provide reciprocal recognition to individuals who are credentialed in other jurisdictions, unless they have laws and regulations that they believe are not consistent with that other jurisdiction. So, and they have to expressly state what those laws and regulations are. So by and large, we still encourage and have just even more authority to encourage the flow of appraisers from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and hope that and encourage that they are recognized by other states that they would like to practice in. You do handle reciprocity very liberally, and we appreciate that. We look at education and how the types of courses that you approve, and make sure that we believe they're appraisal related and they're appropriate, and they have the proper approvals if they need to be IDEC approved, or if they're distance education courses, or if they need to be, or if they have been approved by the Appraiser Qualifications Board, a course approval program, that they have that course approval in file if that's what you're relying on as the basis for your approval. So we concentrate on education. And as I said, last but not least, it's enforcement, which is just something we do concentrate on a great deal. So we look at the complaints that you've handled and the nature of the types of complaints, making sure we believe that they're, that you're being fair and equitable and handling them timely and the like. So those are the types of things we look at, and you'll see there are requirements in that particular policy statement there. In policy statement 7. So that's essentially what our review entails, and what we have been doing the last few days in trying to evaluate your program with respect to these areas. And so, as I said, you will be receiving the preliminary findings from this visit within the next few weeks. And then we can go from there as far as any things that we need to address. So with that, I guess that's essentially what I wanted to share with you, and just kind of let you know what we've been up to. With that said, I will ask Denise if she has anything that I missed or left out. Okay. Otherwise, I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and if you want to at this point or during the course of your meeting as well, we're available. Anything?
Vicki, no, I appreciate your report and your comments. And I echo your comments about our staff. We don't get nearly enough opportunity to appreciate what a professional staff we have. And it's always nice to hear someone from the outside. We recognize from the inside we're blessed, but it's nice to hear that from the outside coming back at us. We agree with you, and always want to know if you see anything less than that from the state of Texas, because we hold ourselves at a high standard, and we want to be sure that we recognize that we are lucky to have what we have. We're also happy to have had to hear that you had the cooperation that you needed from our group. They've always been very cooperative from our perspective as well, and so that makes things run more smoothly all the time. We hope you had a good time in Texas and got some decent Texas weather, and maybe that we fed you a little Tex-Mex somewhere along the way.
We did. We've enjoyed our time here.
Good to you. Well, thank you very much for the report. Are there any questions by any of the board members? We look forward to getting another Texas Rocks report.
Okay. I do have one other thing I just wanted to mention, and I failed to do so earlier. Not only do we appreciate your staff and all that they've done and continue to do on a regular basis, because we do stay in touch on a regular basis with them. I do want you to know how respected your staff is nationally as well. They participate very strongly in ARO, the Association of Appraisal Regulatory Officials. I know Doug and Kristen and others have spoken before that board and continue to be very active in that particular organization. The Texas through them and others on your staff as we've needed them have been more than willing to share things with other jurisdictions. We credit Texas with giving ideas and thoughts and help to other states that in making their programs better. We all have the goal to make the appraisal regulatory programs the best that they can be, and Texas has definitely been instrumental in helping the other states in achieving that goal. And so I did want to let you know that they and in particular Doug and Kristen are very recognized and highly respected across the country, and we rely on, and I know I personally have told other states to call each of them because they're handling a particular situation or that or another, and they have been very responsive in that respect. And I know they're very busy people, so I don't mean to add more work to their plate, but they have never disappointed, and so I thank them for that, and I just want you to know as an organization that Texas is viewed and in high regard by everyone. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Our next agenda item is agenda item number 7, comments from the members of the public. This section is designated for those items that are not listed as agenda items for business before this board today. We are happy to receive any questions, comments, or announcements. We won't be able to take action in any capacity today, but there is the potential for any comments made to become future agenda items. That being said, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Seeing none, we will move to agenda item number 8, which is our consent agenda. The consent agenda currently has 2 items on it. One is the ratification of the official record of our November the 17th, 2017 board meeting. The second item is item 9A through M. I believe we need to remove from the consent agenda item 9C, complaint 16368. Items 9L, complaint 17113. Item 9M, complaint 16281. Are there any other items from the consent agenda that the board would like removed to regular agenda?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move that the board ratify and approve items on the consent agenda as presented, with the exception of the 3 you delineated, 9C, 9L, and 9M. That would be complaint 16-368, complaint 17-113, and complaint 16-281.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Jeffries, a second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Consent agenda with the exceptions passes unanimously. We will now move to agenda consent items number 9C for discussion.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. Item 9C is an agreed final order before you today regarding Mr. John Cox. And bear with me one moment. Here we go.
Page 3 of 7, Troy, if that helps you.
Thank you. And this complaint involves a residential real estate appraisal. And the complaint was filed, I believe, by the homeowner. And as you can see on page 2 of the order, there were some findings of USPAP deficiencies. And then on the next page, you can see the proposed remedial action. And we have caught a typographical error under the mentorship there on page 3 of the order, that it reads that the appraiser needs to complete 8 hours of mentorship, but if you look at that first line there, the written word says 12. So we've corrected that, and we have an amended copy to correct that Scrivener's error for you. So it's 8 hours of in-person mentorship, and as you can see underneath there in the 1A and B that breaks out those. It's 2 hours and 6 hours, so it is a total of 8 hours. And then there's an administrative penalty in connection with that. I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries?
I move that we approve agreed final order 16-368 as corrected.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jeffries, second by Mr. Bolton. Thanks for the eagle eye, Mr. Jeffries. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item number 9L, complaint 17-113.
Madam Chair and board members, this agreed order involves a general certified appraiser, and I'm actually going to bring up the staff attorney, Mark Lee, and let him address it since he specifically handled this case and can probably address your specific concerns. I will just note it is an instance, as you can see on page 2 of the order, items 7, that there is some prior disciplinary history that I think Mr. Lee can explain in more detail based on your questions.
Morning, Madam Chair and other board members. In this particular case, Mr. Dodson has a history with us. And the way the system works is any discipline that occurred more than 7 years ago is not considered either for counting the number of disciplines or for purposes of determining what a sanction is. But it doesn't escape our attention that the person was given instruction previously on a particular topic and may have been placed on notice that a particular way of doing an appraisal was required. So that helps instruct us as to what might be helpful in getting them back on track in this particular case. So another factor was that the recent discipline, which was counted and made this a second time, was a result of a hearing over at SOA. So it was a case where he did not accept our recommendation, had a hearing in the administrative law judge, and then the board, of course, imposed some sanctions. And that included 24 hours of mentorship on that order. So we felt that Mr. Dodson needed some more instruction, either had not learned correctly or sufficiently from the prior instruction or had possibly forgotten some of it. And so we understand that 30 hours is a great deal of mentorship, but thought it was appropriate in this case because of the history. And something else that the board should take into consideration is that Mr. Dodson was represented by a competent attorney, Mr. Walden, who we deal with on a fairly regular basis. And he obviously advised his client that this was an appropriate way to handle this case. Is there any specific questions that you had that I haven't covered for you?
Can you give us an indication of what specifically we're seeing repeat violations of?
His use of the sales comparison approach and the cost approach were really thin. The data he used wasn't analyzed really very well at all, and it concerned us either that he wasn't doing the analysis at all or that he didn't understand how to do it properly. So that was something that, those are obviously fundamental methods for appraisal practice, and so those areas got a lot of attention.
What was the nature of his response?
I don't know what you.
When he responded to the complaint, did he defend the appraisal?
Honestly, I don't recall. I had the deposition this afternoon and was kind of distracted. So I can get an answer for that if you'd like. Would you like me to?
Well, I'm just curious as to if he thought that the level of analysis that he completed was sufficient or not. Obviously, the agency did not. So
right. I don't specifically recall. I'd have to go check.
Okay.
I can be happy to do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mark, I think you've done a good job of explaining. I think the crux of the original question was essentially the stacking of the penalty matrix, if you will. There is quite a bit of discipline on this particular case, but I think the understanding of the previous history is helpful. Mr. Jeffries, did you have any additional questions?
No, that was my basic concern, that in looking at the total number of agreed consents that we had this time and many other times before, it looked like we literally threw the book at this gentleman. And perhaps after hearing your explanation, I'm a little more inclined to understand now how that came about. Clearly the case that we want our folks to be doing it correctly. On the other hand, I don't think we ought to be having penalties that are so onerous that essentially puts them out of business. So, but your explanation was fine, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, and we do take that seriously, and that's part of the reason why, we could have asked for a $5,000 administrative penalty, but we felt it was more appropriate to have him invest that in getting the education rather than just punish him for the sake of punishing.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Yes, ma'am.
We will need to take individual action on this case.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the final, agreed final order as it's presented.
Motion by Mr. Bolton. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Yanuzzi. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move to item number 9M, complaint 16281, which I believe will be pulled.
Again, as much as I enjoy coming and speaking with you, this is one that's a little bit embarrassing. We had an error in an order last time and thought we had gotten our ducks in a row, but we got another one slipped through. This is a case where the order that we sent to the respondent's attorney, again, Mr. Walden, was not returned in full. They just signed a signature page and sent it back to us. And it was very, very unlegible. It was really, really hard to see it. So we asked them to deliver us a copy of the actual page, which they did. And somehow in the process of inserting that page into the order, it was inserted into the original order that we had proposed rather than the final negotiated one. When the board signed the order and we sent it to the respondent, the issue was the fine. We had originally a $1,000 fine that we had negotiated down to the $250. Mr. Walden promptly pointed out to us that that was not, in fact, the agreement that they had made. So we apologized profusely, got it corrected immediately, and then brought it to the board's attention. So we now have addressed this recurrent problem by having an independent review by the legal secretary who actually enters the order into our Versa system. She goes and looks at the order, makes sure it complies with what she had understood it was supposed to be, and then it comes back to either myself or Troy as the reviewing attorney. We go back and look through our emails or any of the documents in the file to see what negotiations took place and make sure that what the order says is exactly what we agreed to. So, and this is done through a checklist. So we've implemented a process to hopefully avoid having this occur in the future.
So I want to be sure that I understand. The order in front of this board has the $250 administrative penalty, so this is the corrected order?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. Does the board have questions of Mr. Lee?
And I'd actually like to make one other comment. And this may help avoid questions in the future. When the board signs an order, it's always going to be your first time. But if you notice at the bottom of the page now, we're putting a footer that tells you what increment of our negotiations this is, so that will help us confirm that now this is actually an amended copy of the order that we were sending back and forth. So when you see that mismatch, then that's why. That's to help us make sure that we have, in fact, the right one presented to you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the agreed final orders and surrenders in the matter of complaint number 16-281, which is agenda item 9M.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Black for approval, a second by Mr. Pena. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Madam Chair, the board will need to take action to rescind the previous order that was entered when we last met in November.
Do you have that order number? Is it list? It may be listed here. Let me just.
Same order.
Oh.
It's the same order.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
So, may I ask, Mr. Black, will you withdraw your motion and Mr. Pena your second so we can attempt to clear up the record?
Yes, I will withdraw the motion so we can rescind it first.
Withdrawn.
Okay. Now, let's
Madam-
try this again. I think we have some language that might be more appropriate.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move that the board rescind the order entered on November 17th, 2017 in TALCB Complaint 16-281 and adopt and approve the agreed order for agenda item 9M as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries, and thank you, Mr. Bolton, for the second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and the corrected motion passes unanimously, and thank everyone for their attempt at that. Agenda item number 10 is executive session. I don't know of any particular reason to need to move to executive session. Is there any need from the board's perspective? Hearing none, we will move past that agenda item to reports by the committee and working groups. Our first report will be from the Enforcement Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Since our last board meeting, the Enforcement Committee met on January 4th, 2018 at 10 a.m. via teleconference. All committee members, including myself, Chance Bolton, and Alex Sostre, were present. There were no other board members joining us that morning. And staff that accompanied us at the meeting and provided a lot of good input were Kristen Werman, Tony Slagle, Troy Bollier, and Mark Lee. We had members from the public who were also in attendance via phone. They are all representing fact and included Joe Wohler, Victor Probant, Walt Sanderson, and Emil Stafford. The committee considered several items, and including the adoption of proposed amendments to TALCB Rule 153.21 that would allow supervisory appraisers to supervise more than 3 appraiser trainees, and proposed amendments to Chapters 155 and 157 of the TALCB rules. The committee recommends the board adopt those proposed amendments to TALCB Rule 153.21 and publish the proposed amendments to Chapter 157 for public comment. The committee does not recommend there be any changes to Chapter 155 of the TALCB rules at this time. We also discussed the Texas Occupation Code 1103.452 as it related to enforcement processes and reviewed the processes for temporary suspensions. The committee requested staff to seek feedback from the appraisal subcommittee, since they were going to be in town this week, regarding whether complaints filed by a party involved in a lawsuit could be dismissed on the grounds stated in 1103.452. We had a lengthy discussion about that topic, and this was the point where we decided let's seek some input from the appraisal subcommittee. We did not at the time set a future future meeting date, and I congratulate Mr. Bolton on being the new chairman of that committee and look forward to continuing to work in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That committee always has heavy lifting to do, so we appreciate those of you that are serving in that capacity. Report number 12, the Appraiser Continuing Education Working Group. Any report there?
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, board members, Tony Slagle, Government Affairs. I am presenting the report for the working group. The working group met in Austin on January 23rd to discuss developing a new Appraiser CE course focused on Texas-specific issues. The working group members present at the meeting were Robbie Wilson, Joe Waller, and Candy Cook. Tony Pastilli and Greg Stevens attended via telephone. Also in attendance were Denise Wisnart from the Texas A&M Real Estate Center, and members of the board staff, Kristen Warman, Troy Bollier, Gwen Jackson, Jennifer Wheeler, and myself, Tony Slagle. Staff presented a draft course outline for the working group to review. Changes were made to the course outline based on the feedback concerning those issues the working group deemed most relevant to the purpose of the course. Based on the revised course outline, writing assignments were given to the working group and to staff to provide content for the course. While the initial proposal for development of a 2-hour Texas-specific course was for a development of a 2-hour Texas-specific course, the working group believes the length of the course should be dictated by the content and is open to recommending a longer course should the content indicate that need. The working group has proposed an effective date of January 1st, 2019 for the course and implemented a timeline based on that effective date. As a result, the working group is aiming to have the course content available for the board approval by the August meeting. This should give time to the providers to prepare for the January 1st effective date. And I'm happy to answer any questions, should you have any.
No question on my part, but just comment. I'm really excited about the group. We've got some good depth on that group, and they appear to be taking on the challenge, and we're excited about the Texas-specific course coming out of that working group. So thanks for the work. Keep at it, and I'm excited to watch the timeline develop.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 13, staff reports. Our favorite part.
Madam Chair and members, Doug Oldmixon, the Commissioner. Welcome to your regular quarterly meeting of the board. Thank you for all of our guests in attendance, especially the appraisal subcommittee team, who is always very thorough and always very professional. A reminder that this meeting is being live streamed via the internet and will be archived on our website after it is complete. So although this is a regular meeting, it is certainly not routine. Officers were elected, working committee members appointed, including peer investigative committee members who assist this board in analyzing complaints that we receive and investigating those. And we appreciate their contribution. Note that the importance of this particular meeting is emphasized by the fact that an appraiser credential holder may receive appraiser continuing education for attending this entire meeting, up to 4 hours. We'll see. I don't think we'll need to go that long, but we will see. This is the year for the board to undergo a strategic planning, rule review, and a special sunset commission evaluation as well. We already heard from the appraisal subcommittee reporting on its biennial compliance review completed this week. The board staff has set new efficiency records in the investigation and resolution of complaints and experience audits, and is proud to share these accomplishments with the ASC and the board. Just 1 week ago, the Appraiser Qualification Board, AQB, announced its adoption of new qualifying education and experience equivalencies that will become effective at the federal level on May 8th. Our General Counsel will say more about this shortly and describe a potential plan for how TALCB can respond to this added flexibility. Also under discussion today is the potential adoption of a new program allowing supervisory appraisers to oversee more than 3 trainees at one time if certain monitoring safeguards are adhered to. Once again, the board is adding more flexibility to the regulatory structure to promote the health and growth of this market. While completing our strategic plan this spring, we will continue to look for additional ways to remove barriers and reduce red tape. We invite your ideas for this ongoing effort. New this year will be online town hall sessions to serve those who cannot come to a live event. Also, please plan to join us for the 2nd Annual Texas Residential Realty Summit to be held here in Austin on April the 2nd, and to earn up to 5 hours of continuing education while exploring the impact of natural disasters on the residential realty market, specifically including property valuation issues. Some details may be found in the bulletin newsletter that we published yesterday, and more details will be distributed shortly as the program is firmed up. Yesterday, the agency was also recognized by the State Employee Charitable Campaign with 2 awards. Out of 90 state agencies participating, we were recognized for the highest percent participation, over 90% of all agencies, and for the highest average per capita gift in categories of agencies our size, over $240 per capita. We're very proud of our team's dedication to this extraordinary effort. So thank you again for your guidance on all that we do to carry out our mission here in Texas. Unless you have specific questions for me, I'll invite the rest of the team to provide their reports and updates. Any questions for me?
No, sir. Thanks for the good work.
Thank you then.
Madam Chair and board members, as the Commissioner mentioned in his report, I am here to tell you a little bit about the revised appraiser qualification criteria that the AQB adopted just last week. You may have received notice from the Appraiser Qualifications Board about their new criteria. These criteria will take effect from the AQB's perspective on May the 1st of this year. In the revised criteria, the AQB has proposed some changes to the college level education requirement and has provided several alternatives for receiving that college education that is required to obtain a license. Those education alternatives are detailed on page 2 of the handout that is before you. In addition to the changes in the education requirements, the AQB has also made changes to the experience requirements. They have lowered the number of hours for the licensed residential credential from 2,000 hours in no fewer than 12 months to 1,000 hours in no fewer than 6 months. They have also lowered the number of experience hours in the certified residential credential from 2,500 hours in no fewer than 24 months to 1,500 hours in no fewer than 12 months. For the certified general credential, the AQB has retained the number of experience hours at 3,000 hours, but they have reduced the time frame over which those hours may be obtained from 30 months to 18 months. In addition, the AQB has also maintained the requirement that of the 3,000 hours required, 1,500 hours must be in non-residential appraisal work. As the commissioner suggested, there are recommendations that staff has as to how we proceed forward with the adoption and consideration of these changes here in Texas. As the board may be aware, our statute notes that Texas will adopt those criteria established by the AQB as our standard for appraiser experience and education. These changes become effective on May 1st, so we anticipate that this issue will come before you for consideration at the May meeting. We have several dates for you to consider as to when we meet in May, and we'll discuss that later on in this agenda. At that time, we would propose both emergency rules and regular rules so that we could implement these changes as close to the May 1st effective date specified by the AQB as reasonably possible. Are there any questions?
No questions, Kristen, but for the listening public's benefit, I think probably the message that we need to send is that Texas will be making the changes, but we will not, those changes will occur somewhere near that May date, so that those individuals trying to send audits to us for review need to be aware that those things will be changing.
Yes, Madam Chair, and we have already begun to convey that message because we have begun to receive inquiries, both on the telephone and via email.
So those items that are in the process of audit at the moment are going to be required by the rules to comply with the current rules. And anything that is near this May date, what will happen to them? Is there a decision about that?
We don't have a specific decision in mind, but applicants, essentially the way the Federal Oversight Group looks at changes in the criteria is that we are evaluated based on compliance with the standards in place at the time a license is granted. So if an application is currently pending and we're ready to issue that license tomorrow, then that applicant would be held to the standards in place today. And applicants, we suspect, may delay their applications until after the effective date of the new standards to be held to those changes in the standards.
Thank you for that clarification. Other questions? Thanks for the update.
You're welcome.
Hello, Lori Deanda, Director of Reception and Communication Services. I am happy to begin informing you that RCS is fully staffed, so I am introducing our new 3 team members. Stephanie Green began her employment with the agency as a customer service representative on January 2nd. Ms. Green was employed by TREC in 2004. She moved to Houston, Texas, and was employed with the Harris County Transit Authority, where she worked as a police dispatcher. She's returning to TREC due to being affected by Hurricane Harvey. Stephanie is a quick learner and is motivated and willing to assist everyone. She remembered the information from the past, so she simply needed to be updated on the changes. She has been fully trained and is available to answer calls on her own. She has over 15 years of experience in the customer service field and outside of work. She loves being a wife of 5 years and a mother of 4 girls. She is excited and grateful for the opportunity to rejoin our team. Please welcome Ms. Green. Our next new team member is Lahonia Young. Ms. Young began her employment on January 2nd as a customer service representative after serving over 10 years in the dental community. She served in the United States Navy aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower during 9/11 and 1 deployment overseas. While serving, she received the Navy E Ribbon, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, and the Sea Service Deployment Ribbon. Lahonia, a Paris, Texas native, has been married for 14 years, and they have a 13-year-old son, Patrick, and their dog, Rocky, who they love. Lahonia enjoys spending time with their family, shopping, and working out. Lahonia is very excited with her position with the agency. So please welcome Ms. Young. Our next team member is Christy Grimberg. Christy transferred from the Education and Licensing Services Division to RCS on January 29th. She began working for TREC and TALCB in September 2010 in the ELS division. In ELS, she had many roles, which she included processing applications for real estate agents, brokers, appraisers, providers, and instructors, as well as processing education. She has been married for 26 years and is a proud mother of one daughter and 2 sons. She is a doting nana to her 5-year-old grandson, and she enjoys spending time with her family and doing arts and crafts. Please help me welcome Ms. Grimberg. Now, please refer to the C1 report. In the month of December 2017, we received 18,763 calls. We assisted 207 walk-ins and responded to 7,717 emails. The next report is the C2 report, and in the month of December, we received a total of 30 customer service surveys. 11 were submitted with comments. Of the 11 comments, 4 surveys were submitted by appraisers, 3 were submitted with comments, and 1 was submitted anonymously. The top 3 categories with the most comments were in regards to the hold time, customer service, and application processing. And of the 11 surveys with contact information, they were all resolved. The next report is a C3 report. The report contains the information per quarter. This information is for September through November 2017. The average hold time was 15 minutes and 5 minutes and 15 seconds for the average length of the call. Now, before I conclude my report, I would like to share some information with you. From the last board meeting, it was mentioned that some of you received calls with comments on the complexity of reaching someone for assistance. So to help eliminate the calls that are directed to you, a couple of items have been implemented to help resolve these calls. Item 1 is in January of 2017, the licensing email box was forwarded to information, which increased the volume of emails. Some of the emails that RCS received pertain to documents that needed to be forwarded to ELS for processing. To prevent RCS from spending time forwarding emails, a new email box has been developed to have our stakeholders submit the documents directly to ELS. The email address is documents@trec.texas.gov. This email address will provide time for RCS to respond to emails and provide assistance. Item 2 is the processing status dates of the broker and sales agent applications and renewals have been posted on the TREC website. The page includes the processing dates and where to submit documents. This page will also be developed on the TALCB website. Once it does go live on the website, I will give you an update at the following board meeting. So this does conclude my report. Does anyone have any questions?
I have one quick question. The phones are answered at what hours?
It's from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And I happened to notice in the TAR magazine that they made note, because of course incoming calls is a problem at all real estate levels, because there are lots of license holders that are trying to call in. I noticed in their publication they actually told their readers what time they received the most number of calls, and for some reason I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning to 11 or something to that effect. I'm sure we have a gauge. I'm guessing that our calls are similar, that sometime after 9 and before noon is when we have the highest call volume.
It's normally between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., but the call queue is actually filled throughout the day. And I did notice this morning, I did a report just to see where we stand, and there has been a difference already in just a 1-week period. And the average hold time, normally it's been like 20 minutes. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And This week, it's 14 minutes.
And we realize that what you're reporting is an average, that not everyone is holding for 15 minutes, and we realize that you've been working diligently to lower that because we recognize that we don't want people holding for 15 minutes, but we're doing the best we can. So the best message I suppose we could send is if we can somehow spread those calls out to the longer periods of time that we're answering the phone, we may be able to have a happier customer on the other end of the line by holding for a shorter period of time. Okay.
The best time would be from 7 to 8 a.m. and about 5 to 6 p.m.
Well, and appraisers get up early, so that's our message to you. If you need to talk to us, call us early in the morning, and we'll see if we can't have you hold for a less period of time.
Right.
How many are answering the phone? What's the I think I've asked that before. It's quite a few. I mean,
Right. We have a total of 16 staff members in RCS. 2 are at the reception desk where they handle the majority of emails and the walk-ins, and the rest answer calls.
And that's 16
Total, which includes me and Amy Jasper.
Has that changed, or is that pretty well stayed the same?
We actually had an extra FTE added to the team, so yes.
Okay, and it's just recently really been monitoring it, it looks like. So.
Right.
Okay. Is there any plans to hire some more folks to help that possibly, or I mean, get that number down?
If that's an option, that's the direction that we can go if it's approved. Or
Just out of curiosity.
Mr. Budget, we'd like to talk to you about that.
Mr. Black, we are we're looking at a whole menu of options to deal with reducing that time and improving our customer service experience, including the possibility, if we have the resources available to us, of hiring additional staff. And that will, as it will be considered in the budget process, which we begin next month.
Right on. Y'all do a wonderful job with that.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for the
Thank you.
information.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Gwen Jackson, Director of Education and Licensing Services. The first report before you for the ELS division is a report on the number of active appraiser certifications and licenses broken out by license type. As you'll see there at the end of the report, at the end of December, there were a total of 2,400 certified general appraisers. There were 2,406 certified residential appraisers, 432 licensed residential appraisers, and 907 appraiser trainees, for a grand total of 6,145 active certifications and licenses. In comparing these numbers with those of December 2016, we licensed 94 more appraisers during this period. If you'll take a look at the column entitled Trainee, which is the 9th column over from your left, you'll see that we continue to see an increase in the number of appraiser trainees, indicating that there is a desire to enter the industry by this method. Are there any questions on this report? The next report before you is for the appraisal management company registrations. And to summarize this report, since the implementation of the AMC program in 2012, there at the bottom, you'll see that we have a current total of 173 AMCs registered here in the state of Texas. If there are no questions regarding this report, the next report is the L1. It provides a December fiscal year-to-date comparison of original applications received, licenses issued, and renewal activity. We received 333 total original applications, or 53 more than the previous year, for an almost 19% increase. 284 licenses were issued from original applications, which is 18 more than the previous year, for a 6.7% increase. 917 renewal licenses were issued, which is 148 fewer than the previous year, which is a decrease of almost 14%. And 10 late renewal licenses were issued. If there are no questions for this report, the next report before you reflects our examination activity. The top portion of the page is for the period September through December 2017, and the examination pass rate for each appraiser type is provided there for you. The pass rate for licensed residential appraisers was 62%. It was 46.6% for certified residential and 73% for certified general. A total of 85 exams were taken during this period. Now, the lower half of this report reports the examination activity for the single month of December. So I'll allow you to take a look at that, and if there are no questions, we can move to the final report. And this final report is our examination activity year-to-date comparisons for the month of December. The middle column is the pass rate for 2017, and the far right column is the pass rate for this period in 2016. As you'll see, the certified general pass rate increased from 72.7% to 73%. The licensed residential appraiser pass rate increased from 53.3% to 62%, and the certified residential appraiser pass rate was lowered from 60% to 46.6%. Our overall appraiser pass rates are slightly down from 63.1% to 60% this December 2017. Are there any questions regarding these reports?
Yeah, I have a question. I've been watching these pass-fail rates, and I see that our certified general is at above 70%, seems to be good, but I'm troubled by the residential. It seems to have consistently been low, and I know we don't have a lot of control over the examination itself. Right. All we really do is track the pass-fail. Yes. But is there any information on how we compare to other states? I mean, 46%, and I don't know what these residential trainees do to prepare. Maybe they aren't doing enough, obviously. But it is substantially lower than the general, considerably. Yes. And I don't know if that's something isolated to us or if that's pretty consistent nationwide. Do you have any information that maybe you could look into to see how we compare?
Yes, I do. I can look up some information for you and have it ready for you all for the next board meeting. If you'd like it prior to that time, I can provide it. I just think it'd be interesting to see if that's consistent across the board. I mean, with other states, or if it's something isolated here. I wouldn't bother me if it was 66, but that's a lot lower. And it seems to have been that way at least most of last year also, I think. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
I've got a couple of questions. Has the exam changed? And then just possibly...
Well, I do know that they periodically update the exam, but I believe that these the pass rates have been fairly consistent as, as...
Is it the same test nationwide?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So just one additional comment to that. Yes, it is the same test nationwide, and the last time we looked, we asked the specific question probably 3 years ago, how do we compare to other states, and we're extremely comparable.
I would imagine we would have to be.
Because the education standards are essentially the same across the states, and the test is a national test, so.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the board. Steve Spiropoulos, Information and Technology Services Division Director. I have 2 reports for you today. The first report is the I-1 report, which shows us online utilization of our applications and renewals as well as website statistics. So if we compare our statistics from the previous fiscal year to date to the current, we had above 2 million total pages viewed previous fiscal year to date versus 3 million, over 3 million this fiscal year to date period. And for our total monthly unique visits, we had increases from 88,824 the previous reporting period to over 153,000 this reporting period. And for online transaction utilization of applications and renewals, all the numbers are up from 46 to 65 on applications, from 91 to 93 on renewals, and our online panel management transactions remain fully utilized at 100%. The next report is the I-2 report, which is a graphical representation of the I-1 report over time. And over time, we can see that our online utilization of applications is above 60% for the last month reported. And for renewals is above 90% for most of the reporting period. And for our online utilization of panel management, we are at 100% throughout the whole reporting period. Do you have any questions for me at this time? Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
They do that on purpose, don't they? Priscilla Pifo.
Follow him so that you can get on
follow
your
the
toes.
tight, right. Priscilla Pifo, Director of Staff and Support Services. Good morning. My first report is the budget status report. This is for as of the end of December. It shows the first 4 months of our fiscal year for revenues and expenditures for TALCB. As you'll note, the budget remaining target is 66.67%. We have no real outstanding issues other than the 2 that we reported last time, which is the rent comes due early, and we have the as well as the maintenance agreements. But the bottom line is about where we'd expect to be. Revenues also are about where we would expect to see them. The majority of our AMC revenues are received at the end of the fiscal year, the last quarter, June through August. If there are no questions about the budget status report, I'll move on to our investment report. We had 1 note mature in December, which we reinvested at the same market value. Our ending market value is virtually unchanged from our last quarterly update, and that's the very middle row under ending market value of $1,019,614. If there's no questions on the investment report, I'll move to the audit report. I have a quick update on, we have an internal audit report that when they reported to you at the last meeting, they said they were working on a human resources review. We're still working with them and getting their input on it, but they're not ready to give the report yet, and we're already working on implementing some recommendations. We'll have a report at the next meeting. We did have, however, an audit from the Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division, which is a 6-year Equal Employment Opportunity Commission review, and that was a compliance audit, which we've received their initial feedback. They're in the process of completing the final report. I also wanted to let you know and give you an update on some of the things we're doing within our division to continue to improve processes. And we've talked about alternative methods of payment so that there could be online payments and receipt of checks. We're in the process of testing that process, and by the end of next week, we expect to have the ACH system in place and fully ready to go. Are there any questions at this time?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. Before I begin my report, I wanted to introduce a new team member who will be joining us in our division on February 20th. Emily Kusnerick. I say new team member. She's actually been with the agency for several years now in the Education and Licensing Services division and handling appraiser licensure matters. And we're very excited to have her join the team. She'll be filling our legal assistant vacancy on the 20th, and she has a background in law and politics and a political science degree from the University of Houston. So we're very excited to have her join our group, and please join me in welcoming Emily. Bring your attention to the E1 report for appraiser matters. And as you can see on this report, as of the end of December, in the bottom left corner, we have 176 matters that TALCB SES is currently handling. As you can see in the top half of the report, we continue to receive complaints, although as you'll see, the number of complaints has continued to diminish. Currently we have 38 so far through the end of December. And then the bottom half, you'll see closed matters. And here I'd note two things that may have popped out to you. In that December column there, you'll see agreed final order / final order, and there's 27 in the month of December, and that is actually a little bit of an anomaly. There was a very large default order that occurred in connection with a very big case, so that's why you see a spike there during a month when we didn't actually have a board meeting. The other I'd point out is under that same column, under the row for dismissed, there's a large number of cases dismissed there, 26. And what you'll actually see later on is that a large portion of those were contingent dismissals. Again, that's the program where, as a condition of dismissing a case, the appraiser goes and gets some continuing education or mentorship and completes that first. So that's why that number is a little bit higher than normal. The next report I have for you is the E1 report for appraisal management companies. Again, this is all through December 31st of 2017. Very little activity and change to report here when compared to November. You'll notice the bottom left-hand corner, we still have only 4 appraisal management company complaints. And as you'll see for the month of December, we received 1 complaint and then 1 was closed for no jurisdiction. So very little activity occurring here. The next slide that I'd like to bring your attention to, total open complaints. A couple of items to note here. I'll start at the top and work my way down. First of all, I'm happy to say that our oldest case, which you can see there, 2009, is one of those requests for assistance from law enforcement that we have to maintain until given permission by law enforcement to close it. But I'm happy to report that that looks like we will be able to resolve it soon. I may have mentioned it previously. It's one that's involved in active criminal litigation, and it's finally going to court. So with that, the staff assistance that they are in need of for testimony will be completed, and we can close that. I actually had a meeting with them about 2 weeks ago. So we hope to soon close that, which is our one remaining request for assistance. What I would like to say, if you look at the bottom, total one-year-old complaints, what I'm really happy to report and what I'm really proud of the staff for is that we have met not only our external goal, but also our internal goal of complaint resolutions. And what I mean by that is that as of February 1, the staff was able to complete and resolve all cases that are more than 7 months old, with the exception of 6 matters that are all on file with SOA, the State Office of Administrative Hearings. None of those are, with one exception that's been granted special documented circumstances by the appraisal subcommittee, but other than that, none of them are over a year old. So we're very proud of that. The team has worked very aggressively to get these resolved, and I've been very impressed. The quality has not suffered despite pushing that final mile up the hill. The next slide that I would like to bring your attention gives you an idea of complaint resolutions so far this fiscal year. And again, this is through December 31st. So you can see on the left-hand side with the pie chart, we have 104 complaints that have been resolved. And you can see the breakdown there with more detail on the right-hand side. About 60%, 62 of them, are dismissals of some type. And as I mentioned on the first slide, the E1 report, you can see there a high number of contingent dismissals, about 37% of the total dismissals. So that correlates back to that spike on the first page that I did mention. I'd also point, again, if you look right above that dismissals bullet there, where it says NOAV default final order, that percentage that number is quite a bit higher. And like I mentioned on the previous report, that was a result of one very large case being resolved by default. We currently don't have any cases that have been litigated, although I can tell you that we anticipate at the May meeting having a proposal for decision for you from SOA, so that number will change. And then, of course, the top bullet there gives you an idea of about 15 agreed final orders and voluntary surrenders, so right now that's about 14%. You can see on the bottom left that currently we have a recidivism rate of 0. That obviously fluctuates depending on what kind of complaints come in and whether that person has a prior history. And then on the left-hand side underneath the pie chart there, you can see that we're talking about a very, very small percentage of our total license holders who actually have discipline. So a very small universe of appraisers get complaints, and even a smaller percentage actually have a disciplinary history. The next slide gives you a perspective on total number of complaints broken down by license type. And you can see this running back over the last 7 years all the way to 2011. And as I said previously, the more recent trend the last couple of years has been a bit of a drop in incoming complaints. Nothing really new there to report. The final slide I will bring to your attention is complaints that originate as a result of an experience audit. And on the right-hand side is a pie chart showing that really over the last 9 fiscal years, it's been a relatively small number that have actually been opened as a result of experience audits, only about 56 complaints. And you can see the breakdown there. The majority of that, just over half, are supervisory appraisers, which makes sense when you consider that trainees are new to the business and they're trying to learn, and obviously they don't have the skill level that a supervisor would. On the left-hand side, we've got the bar chart, and that gives you a little bit more breakdown over the past 3 fiscal years of how that data looks. And currently for this fiscal year, we don't have any complaints that have been generated as a result of experience audits. So I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Good work, Troy. Appreciate the report, and certainly appreciate the fact that you met your internal goals. That's fantastic.
Yep.
Get them down to 7 months is impressive.
Thank you.
And let me just add that our the team outstanding performer for the last quarter of last year, so October, November, December, was actually Robin Forrester, one of our appraiser investigators. Robin, would you stand? Is he there? He was there earlier. Sorry. Well, anyway, he's been an outstanding contributor.
Congratulations. Ms. Warman, move ahead. Move us to
Madam
rules
Chair?
for possible adoption.
Madam Chair and board members, the next item on our agenda is item number 14. You heard about this item earlier in the meeting. This rule is Rule 153.21, appraiser trainees and supervisory appraisers. This rule is before you for consideration for adoption. The amendments to this rule allow supervisory appraisers to supervise up to 5 appraiser trainees provided that the supervisory appraiser and all of the trainees supervised by that supervisory appraiser, say that 10 times fast, meet certain additional criteria as required by the Appraiser Qualifications Board, or AQB. These additional criteria being included in the proposed amendments and up for your consideration are that supervisory appraisers must have been a certified appraiser for more than 5 years. The current requirement is that to supervise 3 trainees, they be certified for at least 3 years. In addition, as another criteria, all trainees supervised by any supervisory appraiser with more than 3 trainees must participate in the voluntary experience reviews established in TALCB Rule 153.22. So for those supervisory appraisers who choose to supervise more than 3 trainees, that voluntary process is now mandatory, or would be mandatory if they supervise 4 or 5 trainees. There were no comments received on the amendments as proposed. Staff is recommending that a non-substantive change to delete the word "or" from subsection A3, capital A, as published, and adopting the amendments as presented. The Enforcement Committee, as you heard earlier, is also recommending the adoption of these amendments.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pena.
I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 153.21 with changes to the published text as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Mr. Bolton?
I'm noticing on page 161.
Hang on just a second. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Pena, a second by Ms. Lynch. Now, Mr. Bolton, comments.
On page 161, and let's see, this is, and it's section 3, subparagraph A. There is right where it's underlined, there is appears to be no space where I think it would need to be.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't know if what we need to do to probably fix that.
That would be one of those non-technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption. But thank you for pointing that out to us.
Well,
we always appreciate the additional eyes.
Hard to say.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and the floor is open for any additional comment or discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Takes us to rules for possible proposal, agenda item number 15. Kristen?
Madam Chair and board members, as you may recall in our November meeting, we opened Chapter 157 of the board rules for our quadrennial rule review process. And before you today, in agenda items 15, I believe it's A, B, C, D, and E, are the proposed amendments that we are bringing forward as part of that rule review process. Item 15 are the proposed amendments to subchapter A in Chapter 57. These would include amendments to Rule 157.4, computation of time, and Rule 157.8, order modifications. The proposed amendments to Section 157.4 add language regarding the mailbox rule from Section 157.9 of this chapter to Section 157.4 to make clear that the mailbox rule is applicable to all required notices sent to license holders and all correspondence between TALCB and license holders. The proposed amendments to Section 157.8 clarify that a license holder must be in compliance with the terms of an order issued by TALCB at the time the license holder submits a request to modify that order. Occasionally, from time to time, when we have modifications come before the board, there's a question as to whether or not that modification was timely, and this amendment is being proposed to clarify that we look at the timeliness of the amendment when it is submitted to the staff, not necessarily when it comes before the board. The Enforcement Committee has reviewed the proposed amendments and recommends that the board publish the proposed amendments for public comment. And staff also recommends that the amendments be proposed and published for public comment.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Lynch?
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 157.4, computation of time, and 157.8, order modifications, as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for the proposal.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Ms. Lynch, and I got Mr. Pena's second just a bit ahead of yours, Mr. Jeffries, so we'll give him credit for it this time. We'll let you be faster on the draw next time. We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? I'm going to try and move us a little faster because everybody seems to be dragging. So we're either going to move quicker or take a break soon. I'm just giving you that fair warning. So we are to agenda item number 16.
Yes, agenda item 16 are the proposed amendments to subchapter B of chapter 57. Again, these amendments are proposed following a comprehensive rule review for this chapter to better reflect the current TALCB procedures and to simplify and clarify where needed. The proposed amendments would occur in Rule 157.9. They would remove language regarding the mailbox rule from this section, since that language, as we just heard, is being added to Section 157.4 of this chapter. The Enforcement Committee reviewed the amendments and recommends the board publish and propose them for public comment, as does staff.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 157.9 notice of hearing as presented for publication and public comments to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
Motion by Mr. Black. Mr. Jeffries?
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Black, second by Mr. Jeffries. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move to agenda item number 17, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 157, Subchapter C, post-hearing.
Madam Chair and board members, the amendments to Subchapter C are also proposed following a comprehensive rule review for this subchapter to better reflect our current procedures and simplify and clarify where needed. The proposed amendments to Section 157.15 decision clarify the format for an administrative law judge to use when preparing a proposal for decision for consideration by TALCB. The proposed amendments to Section 157.16, exceptions and replies, correct a typographical error and clarify that exceptions and replies should be filed with, not by, the administrative law judge. The proposed amendments to Section 157.17 correct a grammatical error and add clarifying language for consistency throughout this section. The proposed amendments to Section 157.18 also add clarifying language for consistency throughout Section 157.18. The Enforcement Committee reviewed the proposed amendments and recommends the board publish them for public comment. Staff concurs in that recommendation.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolden.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC Section 157.15 through 18 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
I'll second that motion.
A motion by Mr. Bolton, a second by Mr. Renfro, both Enforcement Committee folks doing heavy lifting over there. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and thanks for the work, guys. Agenda item number 18, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 157, Subchapter D, penalties and other enforcement provisions.
Madam Chair and board members, there is one rule up for proposed amendments in Subchapter D. Again, these amendments are proposed following a comprehensive rule review to better reflect current board procedures and to simplify and clarify where needed. The rule up for amendment is 157.25, temporary suspension. The proposed amendments correct a typographical error, clarify that a temporary suspension is different from a disciplinary proceeding, and also clarify the determinations to be made by the disciplinary panel. The Enforcement Committee has reviewed the proposed amendments and recommends the board publish them for public comment, as does the staff.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Lynch?
I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 157.25, temporary suspension, as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 157, Subchapter E, alternative dispute resolution.
Madam Chair and board members, there are 4 rules in Subchapter E that are before you for proposed amendments. The amendments are proposed, again, following a comprehensive rule review for this subchapter to better reflect TALCB procedures and to simplify and clarify where needed. The first rule up for amendment in this chapter or subchapter is Rule 157.30. The amendments to this rule would clarify that only the board or its staff, not an administrative law judge, may utilize a contingent dismissal as the method for resolving a contested case. The proposed amendments to Section 157.32 clarify that negotiations may be conducted through email. The third rule up for amendment in this subchapter is Rule 157.33. Amendments to this rule correct a grammatical error, clarify that the same administrative law judge who presides over mediation may not also preside over a contested case hearing if mediation is unsuccessful. Amendments to this rule also clarify that a respondent must pay 1/2 of the mediation fees to the board before the date of the mediation. The amendments to Section 157.37, agreements, simply clarify that that rule is applicable except for contingent dismissals. The Enforcement Committee has reviewed all of the proposed amendments to Subchapter E and recommends that the board publish those proposed amendments for public comment. Staff also concurs in that recommendation.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit to amendments to 22 TAC 157.30, 157.32, 157.33, 157.37 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive change required for proposal.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Jeffries, second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move to agenda item number 20, rural review.
Madam Chair and board members, Before you in Agenda Item 20 is the discussion and possible action to open the review of Chapter 153, Rules Relating to the Provisions of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Act for our quadrennial rule review process. Behind you, or in your materials at page 193, is the schedule of our proposed rule review. We have now completed with the adoption, with the proposed amendments to chapters 157, the first stage of the rule review. Those rules, after public comment and publication, will be up for adoption in May. So the second stage would begin the process by opening the rule review for Chapter 153. And we would bring any proposed amendments to you in the May board meeting after consideration through our committee process. Chapter 153 is the third chapter of our rules that would be open for review in accordance with the approved review plan. And staff recommends to approve the opening of this review of Chapter 153 as presented.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit the review of 22 TAC Chapter 153 rules relating to provisions of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Act to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Black, a second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Kristen. That brings us to agenda item number 21, pending business, with an update regarding the long-term facilities master plan.
Madam Chair and members, for those of you who have been following the news, there's been a development. 2 weeks ago, the Facilities Commission, much like this board, the commissioners there, met, and during that meeting terminated 8 senior executives at the agency, including 2 of the people that we had been working closely with on our project. Fortunately, the third person that we have been working closely with, one of the deputy executive directors, was named as the interim director for the agency, and so I have been in contact with him, and so he's still well aware of our project and interest and exactly where we are, and he simply asked for some grace and time to allow all of the senior staff to be replaced and brought up to speed on the various elements of our participation in the master plan. So the long and the short of it is I hope to have some actual progress to report for you, certainly by May or at the very latest by our August meeting. Okay, and I welcome Mr. Bolton now to the Interagency Facilities Master Plan Working Group. So thank you, Chance. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thanks for the update. Okay. I'm going to move to, I'm guessing that you're going to be our speaker on the listening tour. Tell us what's coming up.
I am. So on the dais in front of you is the text of a news release that was included in the bulletin for this week that went out, that was published yesterday. And so it details there the strategic planning listening tour events that are coming up. So one of the initial important steps in strategic planning is to get out in the field and talk to our stakeholders. And so I encourage you, if this is coming to a city near you, one of these events, to please, you are welcome to come to any of them, of course, but certainly the ones that are near you, we would love to have you there to interact with the public and invite other stakeholders to be there as well. There will be specific questions that'll be published. We're still working on the text of those questions. That'll come out in the next, probably by the end of next week. And then those will also be available on our website, where someone can log into the website, or go to the website and answer the questions, even if they don't come to any event. And in addition, this year, we're going to have 2 live Facebook town halls online, so we're able to actually interact with people who can't make it to one of the other events. So 3 different ways to participate. We encourage your participation, and please get the word out to other stakeholders. If there are ways for us to improve, this is the time to get your ideas brought forward for this board and agency to consider. Happy to answer any questions about the process.
I would encourage you that if they are in your area, I always find it informative to actually be present in the room with those stakeholders, having direct communication with us. It's nice to do, so try and make plans to put that on your priority list.
One other item with respect to that is we're attempting, because of the time that will be spent this year on sunset review. I've asked the staff, and we've made a tentative commitment. It is our goal to actually have the strategic plan done early. So hopefully by the May meeting, you'll actually see the final, or the proposed final, subject to your edits, of course. But normally that process would not be completed until sometime in the summer. But because we're going to go through sunset, we would like to get this done and behind us, because we have other issues to deal with in meeting with the Sunset Commission team. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you to the staff who kind of worked a little bit of overtime and on rush to make sure that everyone had your brand new name tags available for this meeting. Not that, I mean, we know that you know who you are and who each other are, but when you're interacting with the public, or the public is meeting with you, and of course the staff also has, you don't get to see all of the staff all of the time, so it's just a whole lot easier to look at that name tag and go, oh yeah, that's right, I know who that is. Thanks.
Thank you. Investment policies.
Yes, Madam Chair, before you, you have the revised investment policy. You'll have 2 versions. Beginning on page 199 is the clean version. Starting on 202 is the red line version, so you'll see the changes. Basically, we made some clarifying changes to language that would make it easier for us in tracking things, but also we added in some language about the Public Finance Investment Act that allows us to keep it all in one place, so all of our policies are in one place, and that includes the training and the reporting requirements. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and it's the requested action of the board.
I've got one quick question, and it's really more informative for newer board members. So the policy's been around a long time. The Long-Term Facilities Master Plan Reserve is something we've added in the last few years. And in light of some of the announcements that we've just had, don't propose any changes to that, but I'm curious about language. It says that the balance of this reserve fund will be determined based on a review of the projected year-end balances of our budget. And I presume that means that money can flow in or out of that reserve over time, depending on board action and budgeting actions, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I just wanted that clarification.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I move that the board adopt changes to the TALCB investment policy as they have been presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Renfro. Was that you, Mr. Pena? Yes, second by Mr. Pena. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. It takes us to agenda item number 24, discussion and possible action to approve changes to TALCB forms, the application for approval as an appraiser trainee, and the addition or termination of an appraiser trainee supervision.
Gwen Jackson, ELS Division Director. Madam Chair and board members, these forms have been updated to align the forms with the amendments adopted to 22 TAC 153.21, appraiser trainees and supervisory appraisers. And staff recommends approval of changes to the forms as presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton?
I move that the, I move that the board approve the changes to TALCB forms as presented with an effective date consistent with the rule change.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bolton, second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have previously taken up agenda item number 25, so we will move to agenda item number 26, the request for potential future meeting agenda items.
While we're doing that, I would just like to note that we have passed the 2-hour minimum threshold for the award of appraiser continuing education credit for those who have signed up for that and remained for the meeting.
Thank you. There is something to be said for patience in having that work. Does any board member have anything they would like to be included in a future meeting agenda?
I think we discussed that an earlier date is better than a later date in May because of the adoption of...
We're going to talk about that on the next agenda item.
Okay.
But I agree with you. Okay, I don't hear any. Of course, we will be creating agendas according to working schedules at committee levels, and I'm sure there'll be plenty for us to do come May. That being said, let's look at our May calendar. We do have some unique items that have come up with the AQB's recommendations and us trying to get some rules passed in May. Right now, we currently have, May the 4th as a proposed date? Is that what I'm reading?
That is correct. That, however, is also the meeting, one of the meeting dates for the Aero Spring Conference. It typically falls in the latter part of April, but this year it's being held in Seattle, and it is being held that first week of May. So if we keep May the 4th, two of us who are on the Aero Board of Directors, being myself and our General Counsel, Ms. Warman, will have a conflict, and we'll have to make a decision about who goes where.
Well, I would recommend we not host a meeting without our General Counsel and Commissioner, so let's pick a different date.
So there are a couple of other things, of course, on the agenda. The commission meeting is not shown there, but it is on the 7th of May, I believe, Monday the 7th, correct? Yes. The other dates that are available where the room is available include later in May, the 14th and the 21st. None of the other dates is the room available. If we back up to April, in April, there are 3 dates that the room is available in the last 10 days of the month. Friday the 20th, Monday the 23rd, and Friday the 27th. However, Friday the 27th, I have a hard, long-standing conflict and would not be able to attend if we did it on the 27th. But Friday the 20th and Monday the 23rd. So that leaves 4 days, assuming you would grant me the privilege of ruling out the 27th. It leaves the 20th or the 23rd in April, and the 14th or the 21st in May.
Lady and gentlemen, get out your calendars, give us some ideas.
Just one observation is that and I'll leave Kristen to correct me if I say this technically incorrect in any way, that the earlier dates in April will allow us to actually have, by emergency rule, to meet the May 1st, coincide with the May 1st federal effective date for the AQB changes. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
When is the appraisal summit?
The 2nd of April, Monday the 2nd. You're talking about the agencies?
Yes.
Residential, real, second annual, yes.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I'm can be flexible on any of these except for the 20th. I'm going to be out of town. And so.
Okay. So preference to take the 20th off the table. That leaves us the 23rd, the 26th.
Oh, the 14th and 21st.
14th and 21st of May. Oh, I don't know why do I have April the 23rd circled.
You do?
Okay.
What are the dates again?
Not the 26th, though.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, take the 20th off. So the 23rd.
So we'd leave April the 23rd, May the 14th, May the 21st. We've heard a preference to, of course, and I'd like to try and get our rules approved near that AQB May 1st date, if possible.
I agree.
So it's April the 20th. We realize that Fridays are the preferred dates for this group, but it's sounding like Monday, April the 23rd is becoming a one-time need.
You okay with that?
I'm in Dallas that weekend for something, but I could make it here. I mean,
I'll let you ride with me.
tie it in. Or just not go, but yeah. Whatever we need to do.
Okay, so April the
23rd.
23rd, is that an acceptable date for everyone? Okay, let's block April the 23rd, please. Very good. Any additional discussion on that issue?
And then just for future planning, you can see that Friday, August the 17th would be our normal third Friday, tentatively scheduled. Hold that date, we hold the room. We'll finalize that in May at our May meeting.
Very good. Does the board have any other business needs to be taken up by this board? Hearing none, the time is about 12:22, and we will consider ourselves adjourned.
Thank you.
Good.